because I love doing it, not because I need a gift tomorrow. I hope they return whatever it is. I don't need anything. I do it because my mother loved it and I love it. And today I thought, you know what? We've all heard Jeannie's bio a gazillion times from the last 20 years. So I'm not going to read it to you, but Jeanie has been faithful with Historic Hopewell and the library for decades. And when my mother was alive and did this, Jeanie was her right-hand man, and they forged this beautiful friendship. So Jeanie, I'm grateful for that.
Thank you.
And I was afforded the same luxury with Jeanie. Jeanie has always agreed to be the opener and the closer. So we owe a huge debt of gratitude to Jeanie Langford. Jeanie hasn't been around this much. She's been very busy, but all of her videos are up so you can watch them, and all of the recordings that were done this year, minus the historic interpreters, the costume interpreters, they're not, that's how they make their living, and they don't want to be copied. So anyway, all videos are up for the last several years, but this year everything should be up soon, right, Jimmy? Okay, so you can go to the library, you can see everything we've done this year, and thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here. You have no idea what each and every one of you mean to me, and I look forward to this. I'm glad I'll have some time off, but I've got speakers lined up already, so I'll start working again for next year. So today, the dancing Greek, the search for, and I'm going to butcher it, Eustratios G. Zaria, never mind. I can say Elides. So, Jeanie Langford.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. As always, it is my honor and my pleasure to be here with you and share interesting things about Hopewell and its people. This particular story is very dear to me because with what I do, you get to make a difference in a lot of people's lives. You may find that missing relative. You may find
Step up on the step.
you may find the home place where people were from. But this particular story over the years has brought me as much joy as anything I have ever done. And I'm probably going to butcher the name too, but Eustratios G. Psareas, and the first search for him. This story begins in 1870, possibly 1874. It begins in the Messina region of Greece. And as you can see, it's a very beautiful region, lots of old castles. And that's where Eustratios Psareas was born. He married into a family of olive growers. The Messina area is famous for the Kornecki variety of grapes, which are mainly used in olive oil. And the olive growers could make pretty good money with their crops. But in 1910, at the age of 35, Psareas leaves Greece. Greece is in a great deal of turmoil. They're in the transition phase between fighting the Ottoman Empire and the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and getting rid of the monarchy, so a lot is changing. Over 100,000 Greeks will leave Greece for the United States between 1910 and 1920 because the economy was failing. And Eustratios was just one of them. He arrived on the ship Athenia. Athenia was a Greek passenger liner, and it was fairly well equipped. Unfortunately, in 1915, it would be torpedoed by a German U-boat. When he arrived in Pittsburgh, he had a sponsor, because to come in, you had to have a sponsor. Well, while he was there, he met a gentleman named Tom Malamas. Well, word traveled of what was happening at Hopewell. With World War I approaching and businesses starting to come to the area, Mr. Malamas made shoes and repaired them. So Eustratios and Mr. Malamas come to Hopewell in about 1913. They're before the complete boom. So these are just a few of the things that Eustratios Psareas would have seen. Mud everywhere, milling people, lots of businesses, and thousands upon thousands of people going to work at the giant DuPont gun cotton factory. DuPont took great care to help these immigrants that they had hired to be able to speak English and function in America. So if you'll notice here, this is a group of foreigners waiting to go into the DuPont school to learn to speak English, how to order food, and how to conduct business. This is some of the foreigners from many different countries in the classroom learning to read in English and write in English. Eustratios would have been here for the Great Fire of December the 9th, 1915. It was catastrophic. It started back in this area and swept the entire downtown, except for the hospital, which remained standing. And it did not jump the railroad tracks or get to the plant, which was fortunate, because with what was going on in that plant, 1 or 2 sparks could have been catastrophic. It did not reach B Village. Main Street was First Street back then. They did dynamite a few of the cottages to create a fire break just in case. So you can imagine the terror and the destruction and kind of the hopeless feeling of these people. Their business is gone. Where are they going to go? What are they going to do? Well, Hopewell, which wasn't Hopewell yet, didn't sleep long. Some of it was rebuilt in as little as 3 weeks. Mr. Malamas opened the Boston shoe store. And the person in question, Mr. Eustratios Psareas, worked for him. This is Mr. Psareas in front of the Boston shoe store. Mr. Psareas was influential in helping build the Greek church. The original church looked much like the Eastern churches with the domes, and they built said church from yellow fire bricks. Now, yellow fire bricks gave it its beautiful golden appearance. Yellow fire bricks made from some good old Virginia clay, very heat resistant. They were used in furnaces and fireplaces. However, yellow fire brick was really not intended to be outside. Over a period of time, the yellow fire brick would absorb moisture and expand and contract and create all kinds of problems for the structure. The lunch boxes. Mr. George Tennant, who lived in this area, in one of his writings, put, and the Greeks smuggled the bricks for the church one by one home in their lunch boxes. They worked very hard to build this church. They were very proud of it. It was one of the earliest Greek congregations and churches in the state of Virginia. Eustratios Psareas never becomes an American citizen. He registers as an alien in 1940 for the required World War II draft. Eustratios used many different names. Sometimes he was Stratos Psareas, sometimes he was Stratus Psareas, and then right before he died, he became Steve Condos. So this made finding Stratus Psareas very difficult because he had multiple names. He went into the hospital. John Randolph at the time had pneumonia. They sent him home, and he passed away in his home on North 6th Street. Nobody knew that much about him. He never talked about his family, and so they put basically nobody knows anything about any survivors and any family. If there are any, they're all in Greece. So he was interred at Appomattox Cemetery in an unmarked grave and kind of forgotten. In 2014, I picked up my telephone in the history room, and on the other end of the line was Kostas Afantakis. I would later find out that Kostas was my very own personal Greek tycoon. It turns out that Stratus Psareas was Mr. Afantakis' great-grandfather. When he left Greece, he never contacted his family again. He never sent any money home. And they had no earthly clue what had become of him. So Stratus's grandmother and great-grandmother and the rest of the family stay in Greece. That means they survived most of World War I without a man. and they will later survive World War II without a husband or a father. So Mr. Amphitakis said, can you help me? I said, well, I will try, because sometimes I get extremely lucky with things and sometimes they're just a dead end. So I started to work. First I had to find out how many different names Stratus had. Oops, let me back up. This is Canadian Dynamic air compressor. This is Costas's company. He has done quite well for himself and is, excuse me, is a multi-millionaire. So I worked and I worked, and I finally found out that all these people with different names were the same one person.
Jeanie, water.
Thank you. They were all Eustratios Psareas. So then I hunted and hunted and hunted and finally found Eustratios' gravesite. So I called Mr. Amphitakis and gave him all the information that I had found. Well, the next thing I know, I receive a phone call from Costas. It says, Hopewell, here we come. So Stratus and his dear, dear friend Dennis O'Connor loaded up in the car and drove here to find me and long lost great-great-grandpa. This is Stratus and I at the library. And this is where we start dancing. We started off and I was going to show him places on Broadway where great-great-grandfather would have walked. So we walked over to Broadway, and I am pointing out things and telling little stories. And the next thing I catch out of the corner of my eye is Costas. Just a dancing up and down Broadway. Well, Costas doesn't know a stranger, so he crosses the road and speaks to Harley. Harley used to live upstairs over the old Chesterfield, so he loved it. So we're walking, and I'm talking, and the next thing I know, Costas and Harley are dancing. We walk a little further, and people are looking out their store windows, and I'm like, how you doing? Well, by the time we got to the head of Broadway, we had been joined by 10 other dancers. So I finally gave in. We all linked arms and we danced down the other side of Broadway. We didn't get arrested. Everything was good. Our next trip was to North 8th Avenue. I'm not quite sure if this is the same house that was there, but it's the same piece of land where Eustratios Psareas lived and would have passed away. So Costas was on Eustratios' ground and we danced through the neighborhood. Once again, we didn't go to jail, but the joy of this gentleman was contagious. We then went to John Randolph Hospital. Of course, the hospital looked different when Eustratios was in it than it does now. Well, what do y'all think we did out front of John Randolph? And we were joined by a couple of nurses too. This joy thing was contagious. We went to the cemetery, and Dennis, Costas, and I took them to Eustratios' grave. Costas was carrying a bag, and in the bag was some Greek earth, a Greek flag, and a picture. Costas knelt down. Dennis and I stepped back and let him have some time with this great grandfather. And he sat there for the longest time. Tears were streaming down his face. I almost cried myself, and I don't cry often. He was so moved and so touched. Once again, paying his respects. And if you'll notice some of the names, Costas's unmarked grave was among many of the Greeks. Then all of a sudden, Costas jumped straight up in the air, raised his arms, and said, he knows someone has finally come for him. He was absolutely delighted. That following Sunday, we went to St. Elpa's Church. If you have never been inside St. Elpa's, it is absolutely beautiful. So I had spoken with some people from the church and let them know that I was bringing Costas and Dennis to the church. Well, we rolled up in, and everybody wanted to shake Costas's hand. I got to stand with them in front of some of the very ornate relics in the church. Oops. Costas met with the Father, and the Father did a very special blessing for Eustratios Zaredes right there in the church, a man who had been dead since 1940 and had been laying in an unmarked grave. After the church sermon, they had coffee and tea and cookies, and Costas was everywhere. Well, what do you think happened there? Yes, we were dancing. And he just was so happy, could not believe how much the people cared, and some people even mentioned that they had not known Stratus, but they had known Tom Malamas and this, that, and the other. So it made him feel like he had, in a way, come home. And also, he had fulfilled his promise to his grandmother, one of Stratus' daughters, that he would, when he came to America, would find Stratus Zaredes. Unfortunately, his grandmother passed away before we did find him, but Costas feels like she knew. A few days after they returned to Canada, I received this email, and it made me feel so very proud because, hello, Jean, here are some of the photos. That trip was the trip of my life, and you will be part of my life from now on. The people in the church were so nice. I'm getting a quotation for the headstone. I will let you know. Dennis and I talk about you every day. Cheers, Costas. So, I didn't know what to expect, but about 6 weeks later, I got a phone call from Canada. It was Costas, and he said, I need you to be at the cemetery on this day. I said, okay. So I went, still not knowing quite what to expect. I'm going to jump ahead a little bit. There was a large article in the Progress Index about a family being reunited after 105 years. This is Costas, shortly before my trip to the cemetery. Costas, very involved in his community. Runs marathons and he's in the Rotary and gives a great deal of his money to different charities. So on the given day, I went to the cemetery and I waited. Well, up rolled a truck. Eustratios' gravestone had arrived. It is huge. It's in the shape of a cross. It has a rose on it. Rose in Greek culture and Greek mythology is very symbolic of many things, such as rebirth, etc. So they set the stone, and I carefully replaced the flag and the picture. So the family is reunited. I go as often as I can and replace the picture. So that is Eustratios, Psareas, his wife. The lady on the top right would have been Costas' grandmother, and there are the rest of the family. So a lot of the nieces and nephews and great-grandchildren and grandchildren now know, thanks to a little bit of work and a little bit of dancing, what happened to Eustratios G. Psareas. And I'm very proud of this piece of work. And I hope y'all enjoyed dancing with my Greek as much as I did sharing him with you. Oh, and by the way, every Christmas I get a piece of mail that's marked Canada, and in it is beautiful Christmas cards from Dennis and Costas. And I hope you have enjoyed them and that it brought you joy, because knowing Mr. Aphentakis probably brought me as much joy as anything that could possibly happen. And so for those few days while Costas was here, we were all Greek. If you look at the last scene of the movie Zorba the Greek, and I was half asleep when it came into my mind. If you look at the scene where Anthony Quinn and the younger gentleman are on the beach and they start dancing, and then you watch Anthony Quinn throw his arms up, I got to experience that live and in person. And I have enjoyed being here today, and I have let Susan know that I will be back.